All slept, you dope my G's, and a wonderful chamomile tea. How are you guys doing? Today we're just going to do a quick little video on phase plant again. I'm going back to phase plant for a bit because I thought I wanted to do some... Yeah, well, I did a little community poll and you guys voted... well, the vote's still ongoing, but it's definitely between Vital and phase plant. I guess not many of you have current. But I thought maybe I'll slowly start doing another new preset pack again and sharpen my skills with one of the synths that I love the most. So I thought I'll start off with phase plant, maybe I'll switch to Vital, but I made a wicked phase plant preset today. I wanted to share my process with you. And I also just dropped on my Patreon for free. Head down to the link below to Patreon, and for free on there's a publicly available downloadable granular pack where it's basically like 30 cool textures and samples that I found from my hard drive that I've put together as like a little toolbox to potentially use for granular synthesis. So yeah, you can get that for free. But also I just dropped this preset on Patreon as well for the paid members, all right? But yeah, it sounds like this. I'll play it to you with the drums and then I'll break down the patch, and it's called the Black Panther. All right, so nice patch there, especially with those drums. I put a couple of side chains on already to make sure it sounds nice and mixed. But I'll turn those off for a moment, and we'll just look on the patch as it is, like by itself, you know. So yeah, lots of effects going on this one. But let's talk about some tips for phase plant and what I've done. So I've started off with basically this granular generator, and like I mentioned, I used my new folder that I've created. So down here you can select add location and add in a new folder, and so if you download my Grainstorms folder from Patreon, you can click add location and it'll be in there. And then I've just got a bunch of random like different samples that all have completely different textures, and yeah, so you never know what you're going to get really. But there's some chanting. That was one of the ones that I chose here, and yeah, you won't be able to hear it because the gain is off. So this is how the patch starts. So basically I use this granular generator and I apply a filter to it. So the filter is a bandpass filter. It's going all the way from 0 up to 100%, and that's going on an LFO down here. Let me just turn this one off for a moment. Okay, so the main LFO, nice and simple, okay, but we're actually going to turn the gain off as it was before, and we're going to run it through another wavetable here, which is the triangle. All right, so we've got a triangle from down here, and I've set the output down here from the granular generator to go into the phase, and turned it to the right about 75 units here. So now, even though the granular generator is turned off down here, we're still hearing it being modulated through the triangle wave. All right, so that's excellent. For this granular sound, the grain size and the whole grain envelope, I've kind of left it pretty much how it is. It's mostly the bandpass filtering that's doing the movement, and the sample start position of the grains also changes a bit. So what I did was I put on a secondary LFO with like a slow ramp up, and this one just slowly brings the start position of the granular sound to the right. So the tonality slightly changes as the note's held down, so that was really important to create like realism. Okay. And then what I did next was added in some white noise as well. And I put this white noise in with my triangle. So I put it up here. It's tracked to the LFO, so just tracking the output of the LFO. I'll try to explain everything in this patch, but there's lots of small adjustments that have happened, but I'm trying to give you like the basic principles at least, you know? So the LFO is controlling the white noise level, so it's in line with the movement. And that's by having the level on 0 and turning it up 3% or so. But because the white noise, I don't want all of the low end, I've put the filter on as well, a high pass filter. And I've applied a bit of movement backwards to it, so it gives a little bit of a shape to the white noise as well. So now we've just got this high end white noise hit. And the reason I've put this in the group before the triangle is so I could put the filter up here, and then because the signal runs downwards always, so at the bottom now I've got the triangle in its fullness without the high pass filter, because obviously I would need the low end from the triangle, you know. But it's just a smarter, easier way to organise it. So I've only got two groups. I've got a noise and triangle together with the filter happening first, and then I've got the the granular part, which is like the main tonality of the sound. But this is turned off. It's only going through the FM, so it's only this secondary group that actually has any signal output in the end. All right. So what we can do next already is add in my secondary LFO, which creates the funk and the groove, okay? So the first LFO was pretty straightforward. And again, remember, all it's really doing is modulating the band pass. You've got this this slower ramp up LFO is changing the sample position, but that's a very subtle movement, you know? It's really just the main LFO here that's doing the band pass movement on the grains, that's really creating the main kind of movement in the patch, you know. Obviously this small little white noise movement, that's very subtle, but it's mostly that granular band pass that I've got going on. And so next, to funk it up, I add a second LFO, and I'm doing it all to the grid, but because I'm using complex LFO routing, it does sound very off the grid in the end. So I set the output from the LFO to modulate the phase of the first one, and I spin it round all the way 360. So now this secondary LFO, which as you can see here, it's a pyramid shape, but I've just tweaked the curve of it a little bit, because that kind of changes the movement then, how the kind of curve is looking, you know. So it's 12/16 on this one and 4/16 on the first one. And that can be changed, and I've got a little shift macro here where the actual initial phase of the second LFO, which is kind of creating the funk, I can move that initial phase number around as well, and have a slightly different groove as well, you know. I've just tracked it on a small amount, so I could shift the groove in a minute kind of way until it fitted better with the beat, you know. But now we've got to pimp out the sound a lot more. So yeah, what I've done next then is, I think that's everything up until the effects section really. There's the sync mode adds some grit, and I use it in just a tiny amount, and that's also on my slow LFO. So we got two LFOs, remember. You got one that's doing the main bandpass movement, which has been funked up with a like a carrier signal LFO, changing the phase of it. And then we've got this normal ramp up LFO, which is where I can do slow adjustments to the sound over time, because I'm holding down the MIDI note in the arrange window, and I want it to change as it gets towards the end. All right, so we can start to add in some of the effects now. I've gone quite heavy on these. I'm trying to get the new, well, it's not even that new anymore, but I haven't used Faceplant for a while, the filter table and the shaper table. I'm trying to get the licenses for those at the moment, but hopefully I'll have them soon. But I've proceeded without them for now, which is absolutely fine, because there's already so much within Faceplant without those two plugins. But yeah, the ring mod is the first thing that comes on. Adding more noise into the top. It adds a bit of distortion and noise together. So the bandpass noise mode is what I've used, and I've used this trick loads of times. Basically, turn up the frequency all the way to the top, or almost all the way. Turn the bias and the rectify up all the way. turn the spread up all the way, and then you've got some high-end like white noise, digital white noise, and I mix that on the main LFO. So it's in line with the movement, so it injects like a nice high-end kind of noise into the signal. And I wanted to do that first because distortion and things are going to come on after, and you can sometimes switch, well, I often switch around the position of the plugins to find the best, the best like combination for that sound, and sometimes it's different. So this one I actually put on at the end, but then I pinged it over to the beginning of the chain and it's fitted better there. So next I've got a filter, and this is basically like an EQ boost that moves, so I can like target the low mid-range where the key expression of the sound is and give that a bit of movement. So just on my main sort of bandpass LFO again, just a little bit of movement around sort of 150 hertz going up, not too much. You can see I'm just low mid-range in that area only to emphasize the most important frequency of the bass, you know, bass/lead. It's like a bass and a lead in one, this sound. All right, next we're going to convolute it to give it like a bit more of a natural edge. And notice I haven't used any distortion yet because I wanted to like put some of these effects on before I add the distortion, which is very, very necessary. But here is the convolver. I've just chosen a little preset called the lozenge something, the lozenge box slapback on the Spaces Experimental. It sounds great. It's got a bit of movement on as well in two ways. It moves with the bandpass LFO, and that sort of impact point when the bandpass is like at the top, when you've got the fullness of the high end of the grains, that's when the convolution is actually off, so it becomes a bit tighter and more straight down the middle, aggressive on the impact point of the sound, and then it gets like more convoluted for the like less important part of the movement, you know. So mixing it backwards. And there's also a slow LFO that brings the whole convolution up as well over time on my kind of my LFO here, which is that like the one that adds variation into the MIDI as the notes held down. Next, we finally distort it quite a lot, 5 dB, adding some stereo spread. Okay, now everything kind of gets saturated together, and that's very important for the volume and the whole sound. Next, we do a bit of non-linear filtering, and this is always great to add in extra tonality and choose the areas that you want to add some extra harmonics to. So the non-linear filter is great because you can basically use the modes to add a different sort of distortion signal with a kind of particular filter shape. But up here you've got the option to have basically no filter, and then the filter will be very, very subtle, and it will just have the kind of harmonics in there which the mode kind of determines for it. So basically you can add like a color and movement without filtering out too many of the frequencies. So that's why I like to use the nonlinear often as a coloring tool, but without actually using any of the main filters. So it keeps the sound still full. So I drive it up all the way to get that full color and shape, and it still sounds like not nice, not over distorted. So you can leave that drive up often, you know, and the cutoff, giving that a little movement to the position, you know. The comb filter now, this is where I add a lot of stereo width because I like using this as a way to add stereo. It seems to be really nice and clever. Really nice, clever way to add like a full, rich sounding stereo with new harmonics. So I basically select the stereo mode on the comb filter and then turn the mix up to 20 or 30%. And you can mix this, again, I've mixed it backwards a bit so that that impact point of the bandpass sound is a little bit more mono, and then it, like again, like I did with the convolution, and then when it gets to that part of the sound where it's not as you're not at the top of the ramp, you know, you're at the bottom, then it becomes wider, you know, so it's more focused and mono for the impact always, and then a bit wider and more stereoed for the down part, you know. Hope that makes sense. And you can adjust the frequency to find a good like kind of voicing spot, because it will like kind of pan it around differently, and you've got to basically find where it feels like it gels together well so that it's coherent. Shout out to coherent. Distortion next. This is again like layers upon layers of distortion to sort of consolidate the effects that I've put on, almost, you know. It's almost like the distortion saturation is like a consolidation and volume boost tool for me. So the hard clip this time just to have a different color, a little bit of movement on the drive on our bandpass, the LFO, a little bit of spread again. Okay, that's the great thing about phase plant, is you can stack those distortions and they always bring things to a much louder level, and it adds new harmonics and it sounds great. So that's that. Flanging next. This is like, it's on a few percent from the beginning, but it increases over time on my slow LFO here as well. Okay. So it gets a bit more flangy towards the end, so the sound becomes almost a bit weirder and a bit looser, and then it tightens up when it repeats again, you know. So it's just a slower automation of variation in the sound quality, essentially. Sort of almost like degrades the quality a bit, you know, but more in the sense that it loses its kind of pitch, and it loses it a little bit of its mono power, but only a little bit, you know. Then a little high shelf boost. Because I haven't really used much high end, you know, in the wave tables, it's the bandpass is like not really got too much high end on. The triangle doesn't really have hardly any. It's only that little bit of white noise, you know. So generally the sound was quite warm to begin with. So then I just boost the highs to kind of bring out a bit more brightness, so it's a bit more even across the spectrum again. And then the convolver again. Here I'm using it in a much more subtle way, and this is a long reverb. The first one was quite tight, and this is more like the room sound, a bigger, more epic, longer kind of reverb room sound. So it's the two sort of different lengths of reverb. This one is more subtle, but it actually comes on a bit more on my long LFO as well here. So the reverb, you hear it more as you get to the end, you know. And then finally, another high shelf, just because it needed a bit more, and on a slightly different position, but there you go. And that's the Black Panther patch then, and I'm pretty sure I explained all of it. But yeah, this is just me getting back into phase plant for the first time in a while, and using a new little folder that I've got of granular sounds. This is just the first one I picked, and so I'm going to try to design some more cool stuff with phase plant and give you some tips as well along the way. When I create something cool, I will share my process so that you hopefully learn something. And this one I dropped it already on Patreon for the paying members. In case you want to download it, you can. But you can get the folder I've put together of the granular like generator like textures for free. You just head over to Patreon anyway, and it's up there as a free Dropbox file. And then so that's the first one. This is just me getting back into phase plant a bit after having a long extended period using current only. But I think it sounds pretty cool. I'm pretty happy with it so far. Also notice how I didn't use the global unison, because I'm really enjoying the comb filter method as a way to add stereo, because it almost does it in a more powerful way, I've found. So that's another little bonus tip about how I'm kind of gearing away from the global unison. It also increases the CPU of the plugin quite a lot when you use that. But sometimes it can be great. But if you can make your sound good, like in mono, like without the unison, then like if you're relying on the unison to make it good, then often you're doing something wrong in the very, very initial stages, because you could get a great sounding sort of mono sound already without having to use the unison. The unison like instantly makes stuff sound cool. So I used to use it loads when I started with phase plant, but now I'm trying to be more, yeah, careful about overusing that, you know. But yes, that's it wrapped up for today. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought. And if you want me to make some more phase plant tutorials, I can, and I'll try and sort of share my workflow as I learn new things about it. And yeah, all the knowledge that I do have on phase plant is also available for me to teach you via one-on-one lessons. So people usually come to me for one-on-one lessons for improving their tracks with their mix downs or compositional advice, all manner of things really. But it is possible that if you just want to learn about synthesis, then we can just do lessons where we just jam out in phase plant together or something, and I direct you on your side so that you can learn like how to make some basic sounds and get started, and show you some like more advanced techniques as well if you want to learn about those. So that is something I teach in my one-on-one lessons as well, just to let you guys know. And phase plant preset packs, there's many on my website. I've done a bundle recently called Phase Plant Prodigy, where they're all in one, so you can grab the whole pack in one go. That all of the packs I've made in one download, and you'll save like 30 euros if you buy them all at once. And yeah, aside from that, my G's, thanks for all your support, and I'll catch up with you guys very soon. Until then, much love.